So here we are. It's Spawn Batman 3, Batman Spawn 3. At what point in the process did it hit you? Did it finally hit you like, oh my God, we're actually doing the third volume? Like, we're actually going to do it?
Well, for me, it was when I actually, got contract talks going because Marie Javins, who's the editor-in-chief at DC, she phoned me up or sent me an email or whatever, I don't remember now, and said, would you be interested in doing Spawn Batman crossover? And, I'm working on the Creech 3 right now. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really hopeful you'll be able to get that done. It was tried in the past. And she goes, well, I think, we got the right people in place and we can make it happen now. And I go, yeah, okay, listen, sweetheart. No, I didn't call her sweetheart. I know I'm more respectful. But I was like, listen, dollface. No, I didn't say that either. But I was like, if you can make that happen, yeah, I'd be interested. But it was all with not one iota of belief that they would be on the same page and get to launch this thing. So I was doubtful until the last very moment when contracts started to be discussed and inked. And so, yeah, I didn't believe it would ever happen, man. I thought it was 2006 all over again.
Right. How about you, boss?
For me, same thing. Once somebody says yes and you're talking to lawyers about contracts and it's like everybody's rowing in the same direction, it's going to be a reality of it. I think that by the time Marie got to Greg and I had been talking to him, I was going, well, I'm not going to do this unless Greg does it. And I think that Greg will be intrigued by it. Right. Mm-hmm. So, because I talked to Greg over the years about this going all the way back to 2006, but even more so, a little bit more recently. And so by the time she phoned Greg, it wasn't like she had me on board already, but I was only on board if Greg was going to be on board.
Sure.
Right. So she didn't really have to land me. It was one of these ones where we were all sort of converging to the same goal, whether we all knew it or not. Because for me, there is no book without Greg. Like if Greg says no because he's busy or he's got other things, then I wouldn't have moved forward. I'm like, no, if I can't do it with Greg, I'm not really interested. And that's not to say that there aren't hundreds of great artists out there that wouldn't be sort of fun to work with, but it was for this particular crossover of these two characters. There was nobody else that could do it, I thought, to the magnitude that it needed to be done, given that we had teased people in the past other than Greg. And why? Because I thought it was fairly obvious.
Yeah.
Greg made a career on one character and he made a career on the other character, and he's a known quantity for both. And he's arguably, to some people, the best Batman artist they've ever seen and the best Spawn artist. Done.
It's true.
Done. There's nobody that comes close. Like, okay, Todd's drawing Spawn. Cool. Greg, just so you know, draws a better Spawn than I do, but I draw Spawn, and I did a little bit of Batman. Not even me. I wouldn't even come in a close second, even on that level. So it had to be Greg, and if without Greg, then this all falls apart. So I'm glad that he was willing to set aside the Creech, which I know is a passion project for him for a bit, to take on these 48 pages.
Yeah. Well, speaking of visuals, and I think this speaks for both of you, seeing this book, and I'm lucky enough to have actually got a chance to read it ahead of time, I can say that it is like coming home visually. Like it feels like a return to something, but with a modern approach. And I thought, what changes, if any, did you guys want to make and implemented that maybe you wouldn't have made, 20, 30 years ago?
Well, 20 or 30 years ago, I wouldn't have given it any thought. It would have come out and it'd have been what we do. But when this was definitely going to be a go, I thought to myself, a part of this, aside from it being cool that it's Batman and Spawn going to be in the same book, another team up, and it's, apart from that, I said part of it is Todd and Greg back together. A lot of people that's going to tweak their nostalgia, right? Because comics says that's what comics is for a lot of us, right? We have our nostalgic moments and we hang on to those for forever. And so I said, I look at the work we did back then when we were much, much younger men, And as Todd would like to say, you could see the youth on the page. And I'm just, it's like other people did it. I go, how did we put this much detail? It's excruciating. And we would crank that stuff out at blinding speed and numb as, I mean, it was just, I don't know. I wish I had that superpower now. I lost it somewhere along the road. So one thing I said to myself was, hey, old man, you're going to have to pick up your feet and make it seem like, you guys didn't miss a beat. And this is just another issue off of Spawn, and what you were doing month after month after month after month, And so, and that was much to the dismay of my partner in crime here, Todd, because he's like, what the fuck are you doing, man? With all this stuff. And I'm going, hey, old man, you better open those pages, Spawn. Look what we used to do. I go, I'm just trying to follow in our own footsteps. And so to me, that was the conscious decision to go over the top with the detailing and all the trash in the alleys and the line work. I wanted it to, for those who have been fans of Todd and I as a team, which there are many, that when they pick up this book, which they are guaranteed to do, that when they open it up, it will be everything that they remember. I mean, you can't have a proper reunion. It's just like right now there's a Pantera. We can't call it a reunion because the Abbott brothers are dead, but it's a tribute.
Mm-hmm.
But you got, Zakk Wylde bringing the flame. They're bringing it, you know what I mean? And so that when you go to that Pantera show, you're back there. It's exhilarating and it's fulfilling and it's everything you hoped it would be and more. And so that was it, man. I was just trying to bring it for the fans to go, wow, yes, this is how it was.
And for me, it was knowing that Greg, like me, can sort of rear our childish sort of emotions very easily, to just let him put on paper what might be fun for him to enjoy, which is why the first question that I asked once we sort of got the contracts out of the way was, I got on the phone with Greg and said, what do you want to draw? I didn't have a story. I didn't have the story. I wasn't going to come up with the story. I didn't think it would be fair. It would be sort of respectful to Greg without sort of getting his input. So I was like, hey, Greg, we're going to do this. Thanks for coming on board. I think it's going to rock. By the way, what would you like to draw? Because whatever you say you want to draw, I'm sure that it will show on the pages. And if it shows on the pages, it'd be an awesome book I would want to buy. And all I have to do is figure out how to accommodate my story to get to what you want to draw. That's easy, right? As a artist first, writer second, it's easy for me to basically come up with story elements that fit visuals, right? And maybe that's backwards to some people, but for me, it's worked my whole career, and especially with Greg.
Yeah, I mean, it led the industry for 25 years, so it can't be wrong. Is that where the owls came from?
Todd asked me, as you were just saying, what do you want to do? What will get you excited? And of course, the first obvious, go-to is the Joker, especially being you have the parallel of, the clown violator and all that. And because that's part of the mirror image, of the Spawn and the Batman universe, but right. I think, speaking for myself, I've had enough Joker for a time. It's one of those things where they just, I get why there's a lot of it out there that's successful, but I think, instead of burning out on more Joker, which would have been cool and fun, he has his appearances and we see the Joker, but let's do something else. So to me, the obvious thing was Court of Owls, because, Court of Owls is during my Batman run, it's what I'm kind of most proud of. I think Scott had a brilliant idea with the lore behind it, and I just I'm so proud of it. And so I go, it'd be really cool to introduce that into the story, and so that worked out perfectly with Todd, which he'll explain in more detail. And I had the opportunity to create a new talent, which is going to make an awesome toy, by the way.
Oh, sure.
You'll all want to pick up immediately upon release. So yeah, that was it, you know. So I'll let Todd take it from there.
Yeah, well, Greg, you can lob anything at him visually. I've learned over the decades of being around Greg that he'll hit any basically pitch I can throw at him. This is going to be no different. And to me, I want it to have a little bit of fun visually, but without getting distracted from the title of the book, which was Batman Spawn. I assume that's why people were going to come. That's who people wanted to see. And it's kind of easy to get distracted with other things. And if all of a sudden we had the court and we had the Joker and we had all a Prison Break and Arkham Asylum, and then we had all my heroes basically coming through the portals, and what it gets muddy. I think the waters get muddy, and
Sure.
I wanted to focus. I think there's a lot in there. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of threads. There's a lot of sort of, you know, there's a visual one panel and a one panel and a one panel, and maybe it's too much of a tease at times, but I didn't want us to in 48 pages to go, oh, now we got to service that idea for 2 or 3 pages, and next thing you know, you're running out of pages, right?
Yeah.
Because Greg committed to 48 pages, and I didn't want to come back to him and say, hey, can you do 50 or 54 or 60? I wanted to basically be sort of as true as I could to it. And so the only way I was going to do that was to stay on course. This is a Batman Spawn book. Put all the window dressing there, put all the fun stuff that I would want to see, but don't lose sight of what the story is. It's about these two men, and some of their similarities and some of their contrasts that are on there. And I'm glad Greg picked the Court of Owls, because I agree. I think there's no lack of Joker stories out there.
Right.
And I think people are excited to see the Court of Owls, especially a new Talon that's in the book. And we just launched it. We just launched it from there, and just made it up as we were going. Literally, made it up as we were going.
It feels like Batman and Spawn, if you compare this to the last, they have kind of cooler heads than they did. I feel like, is that a reflection of you guys now as creators, where it's like you could still bring the heat, but we can't just have Batman and Spawn punch each other for 20 pages. We have to do something something else.
They're old and tired like we are.
Right. Like
well, Spawn is now 300 issues deep, and in my mind, he has matured. He understands that being angry all the time isn't the way to go. Although his emotions do flare up in this book, but yes, I at some point when you're a grizzled veteran of war, then of course you have to sort of slow down and catch your breath and be a little more methodical about some of the stuff, right? Without betraying who you are. And so I would say that the Al Simmons character is way more emotional than Bruce Wayne is, for sure.
Sure.
So I needed to show that part, to show that it actually can be a detriment to things moving forward, and wanted to show that, you know, not having superpowers but having the intellect that Bruce Wayne has also has huge advantages to it too, right? Especially given that, as I mentioned, he couldn't quite trust Spawn. He wasn't just going to give in. He's not that sort of silly that he's just going to say, "Oh, you're getting screwed. I'm getting screwed. So you know what? You and I are going to be pals." So he did have his backup plan, which was building that device that he has at the end. Right?
Yeah.
That was his backup. That if he got in trouble, then he was going to literally release the hounds, even if he had to do it on Spawn himself. Right. Because he didn't know he could trust him either. So. Yeah.
I read a fun interview earlier about this book in which you talked about, you know, with the old 2006 pitch that you did want to do, you know, Joker and Violator, that kind of lent itself to that idea. Obviously, there are some shades of that. I think that was in its own way a little bit of an homage, like, hey, this is a cool idea we had. We tried that out. But I think there might be, based on how this wraps up, a little more than you're letting on, that maybe there's more to it. And is there, without getting into any dicey territory, a desire for another one?
So here's I would say, and then I'll let Greg go. Obviously, usually doing more of something is predicated upon a couple of things. One
Sure.
is the commercial success of the first one, right? So if a movie doesn't do well, they usually don't do a sequel, right?
True.
And then if people like it and they go, oh my gosh, I'd want to do another one, then the question is, can you get the original people back to do more of it? And that's sort of the second part of it. So I know that Greg and I, although, you know, we're just catching our breath from getting this done, and it was a labor of love, but it was still a lot of work, that we need to catch our breath, and that maybe down the line after we see, I mean, look at the sales are going to make it the #1 selling comic book of the year. So that one, that box is checkmarked.
Right.
So now the question is, how long, even if we both wanted to do it, how long do you wait before you do the sequel? My brain tells me you wait longer than people think, so that you create a pent-up demand, and that all of a sudden people go, oh my God, it's been 10 years and they're finally going to get the Joker and Clown together, and they're going to come back and do it. And remember, there's the cliffhanger. I don't know that you even think about it, even if we wanted to, that you come back like 4 months later and say, hey, we're going to now give you part 2, because why not make it a 100-page story and just tell the big story in and of itself? So
sure.
It was just a lot of fun comic book stuff. Like here, like, you know, here's these two heroes. It's fun. Here's a flashback to all the rogues gallery. Here's a new character talent. It's based on a new modern characters that Greg and Scott Snyder created. And you've got this weird twist ending sort of at the end on the last page. And then you've got the last panel that like is sort of like, and you're going, oh my gosh. So what? It's not. It's just teasing for a potential. Nothing wrong with that. I used to like comic books that when I was done with it, my first instinct was I wanted more pages. So,
yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I wanted to ask how much, and I think we touched on a little bit, but how much restraint did you guys have to exercise in doing this? Because after this much time and jumping into it, like you can see the fun and the love that is on every page, not just with Greg's pencils, but like with your inks, Todd, just getting to add to it in that regard. It has some kind of an extra gravity to it. And it feels like maybe there was some kind of desire to like, all right, we got 48 pages. We got to throw the whole kitchen sink at this thing. And I don't think this is not a kitchen sink book. This is one story, 2 characters. Let's do this.
One night.
Yeah.
6 hours. Yep.
Right. Yeah, and there's a ticking clock element to it, of course, which also is a fun little like narrative device that gets the reader to want to turn the page, even though you've got a Capullo McFarlane book in your hand and you want to look at every panel for at least a couple minutes. But yeah, was that tough for you guys to be like, oh man, should we throw more at this?
Well, I mean, Todd, and put plenty of good material in there for any artist to have fun. My thing, as I keep saying, was a big part of this is Todd and I reuniting and us bringing the heat that we brought back in the Spawn days. So I just kept going. Here's what used to happen back then, okay? And now, it's so much road between then and now that he's forgotten how sick it was. But so I'd put down a lot of detail, and the inks would come back with more detail. So I said, okay, he'd like to see more detail. So then I'd bring it to that level of detail. And then the inks would come back and there'd be more detail. So I go, oh, he wants even more detail. So I would bring it up to that level of detail. And then the inks would come back with more detail. So finally I go, okay, I'm going to do it like here. And what he adds. And because it was always escalating. Yeah. And so we brought ourselves to a dizzying height, if you look back at some of that stuff. And while I did not want to go back to that dizzying height at this age, I knew that we had at least come very close to that, so that when a reader picks it up without going back and opening Spawn comics at the peak and put them side by side, that it'd be good enough to fool them into going, hey, the two old boys are still doing it like they're young dogs.
Yeah. Absolutely. There is another collection coming out in April, I understand, that's going to collect this plus the other two. It's going to be kind of bigger. Is that something that you kind of had any thoughts about? Because, you know, it's always fun to get like closer to maybe what the original art looked like, because you really get to see it a little bigger.
I look at it, I'm completely biased. I think at some point, DC, us, we should show off those 48 pages just of the pencils, because they're staggering, right? There's a beauty in raw pencils because of the gray, and you get like shading in it that you can't replicate with ink. I think people would be staggered, and all you have to do is just go and look at what Greg posts on Instagram and Facebook, and you can see it, right? I mean, it's like, it's just, wow. It's almost, I almost feel a bit guilty putting the ink on it. And then because of that, then, you know, I try to bust my butt on the inking end of it. And I think there's another beauty just in black and white artwork, original, what we would call original artwork too. Because what happens with black and white artwork is that you put your own colors and your mind's eye on it, but more importantly, there's nothing there that basically hides any line. So you get to see every line laid bare. And there's I think a simple beauty to black and white artwork. Not that Dave McCabe didn't hit it out of the park and do a wonderful job.
Sure.
But you know, I think that if they, and I don't know whether they're going to combine all the quote unquote prior books, and or whether they're going to say, hey, here's step 1 pencils, here's step 2 black and white, and then here's step 3 the color one. I think all those iterations could be done, but I think it would be a shame if at some point in the future people don't get to see what Greg was doing with his pencils and what those pages look like in black and white, because I would have wanted that, maybe because both Greg and I want to be artists when we were kids, so we would have bought it. So
sure. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for not only your contributions to the industry, but to this awesome book, and for your time today. And congrats on the book, guys.